Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the viewers of the Mojo platform, a platform that has tried to return news to the people and approach current affairs and content in a very, very different way from what you see on primetime television. In this alternative universe, we are actually prepared to listen to each other and even when we disagree with civility. On the program today, we're looking at whether this is an inflection point in the MeToo movement. This after actor Payal Ghosh has leveled charges of sexual harassment against film director and producer Anurag Kashyap. Now, many of Anurag Kashyap's colleagues, his friends, as well as his former spouses have sprung to his defense and have said that the timing is suspicious and this looks like a way to silence him and his dissent against the political establishment. But others have said that if women are to be believed, then why are we not believing Payal Ghosh? Going beyond this individual case, but also looking at it, there are wider questions that arise for the Me Too movement. Have the limitations of the Me Too movement been, in a sense, exposed? How do we preserve the core of the Me Too movement from both politics and bias in such a way that it speaks to all women? I want to introduce on the program today a very, very special panel, and I'm going to introduce them one by one. I have first with me Sandhya Menon. Sandhya Menon has been a journalist. She's also been a sexual harassment survivor. But what is important for you to know in the context of today's show is that Sandhya Menon was a principal architect of the Me Too movement in India. In fact, Sandhya actually mobilized people and shared her own story. This was a movement that hadn't yet made its way from the West to India. So thank you, Sandhya, for once again being here and sharing your story. We're also joined by my friend Guneet Monga, someone I have a lot of respect for. She's a filmmaker. She's the CEO of Sikhya Entertainment. She's an Academy Award winner, a very, very acclaimed movie maker. But today she is here in the context of being someone who has worked with Anurag Kashyap and also being someone who has written a very, very passionate defense, a long note in his support saying whatever other disagreements she may have had with him, this is not something she thinks he is capable of. And also welcoming to the Mojo story today is Asiya Shervani. Asiya has spent many years advising organizations on best work practices, especially when it comes to how to create safe working environments for women. After the Vishakha guidelines, where it is now mandatory for all workspaces to have recourse for women who want to talk about, sexual harassment, sexual abuse, their own experiences of Me Too. Asiya has been advising them, and recently she has also advised several companies who are connected to the film industry in particular. So I think she knows what she's talking about in this context. So thank you, everybody. And I'll start with you, Guneet, if I may. Explain to us a little bit about what made you post that note strongly coming to the defense of Anurag Kashyap. And again, the reason that we're looking at the Anurag Kashyap case in particular is because this is a case that opens up many conversations about the wider debate, right? Because the moment we say women should believe women, and that was at the core of the Me Too conversation. But this time, we are not believing, when I say we, I assume you are not believing the woman in question, Payal Ghosh. So talk a little bit first about what made you post that very passionate support for Mr. Kashyap.
Thank you, Barkha, for having me here. And I think whatever I wrote came straight from the heart. I saw the video, and that just made me really angry, really upset. And I am somebody who strongly believes in supporting women.
Yeah.
I have strongly supported the Me Too movement. I have, and I've also had the opportunity of working closely with Anurag. What really was upsetting about was any survivor sharing her trauma on social media or otherwise. I don't think it is. I don't know if anybody would drag other women and speak so poorly about putting them down, saying people have to resort to sexual favors to get any work. People have, women are average looking, and these are some of the most talented actresses in our business and friends and people I look up to and who've built a mark for themselves. So I think, you never really come up or share something by putting others down.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, that is something that was really upsetting more than anything else. That kind of led me to first tweet that, how dare you put other women down, and and then talking about Anurag, I mean, he's been a mentor to many of us, and um, and not saying that a mentor cannot be a sexual predator, a creative genius cannot be a sexual predator,
Yeah.
and I want to support a woman with trauma, but I just cannot. Believe the timing of this. Just when he stands up and takes a tough stand, puts out his messages, puts out a strong word. He's always been somebody who's outspoken. He's always been somebody who's put his thoughts and speaks the truth, stands for the truth, has written some amazing, had written, directed some amazing women-led movies, and his characters are always, I mean, he's always made space for women. Talking about myself, it compelled me to share my journey with Anurag. I ran his company for 5 years, and and I passionately do say that, when we talk about women rising at work, women having equal work opportunities, equal pay, this is all something at the core of Anurag. This is something that I know working with him.
Yeah.
And even being very young, he's always been like, she's my CEO, you deal with her.
Mm.
So I have closely experienced it, and I put that out there for people to share
Right.
and their complaints, but just feel like timing of this is very malicious.
Yeah. So, Guneet, just for the context of people who may not know what you're talking about when you say that other women were in fact pulled in, I think it's important actually to explain that what happened was that in the video that Payal Ghosh actually released, there was a reference to three other actors, among them Richa Chadha, Huma Qureshi, and Mahi Gill. And in fact, there was a throwaway remark to how they were very ordinary looking, but they still managed to get work with Anurag Kashyap, and how allegedly Anurag Kashyap told Payal Ghosh that they're just a phone call away. Richa Chadha has now taken legal action on this. So we're talking about something very sordid, but at the same time, there is a feminist dilemma here. Now, Guneet Monga, who has worked with Anurag Kashyap for 5 years, now runs her own company, but has made a point about saying that Anurag Kashyap gave her authority, despite disagreements that they may have had in the course of their work. This is not one of the disagreements. And she sees herself as a champion for women's rights, but she's not convinced of this case. I want to bring Sandhya in at this point. Sandhya, as someone who's been a harassment survivor, as someone who's been at the receiving end of not being believed, as someone who knows that what women have to go through when they say me too, is that people will turn around and say two things. Pehle kyun nahi bola? And why should we believe you? How do we then explain as women? How does a Guneet explain, as she just did, that she doesn't, in this case, believe the woman? Does that create a moral dilemma for feminists?
So, Barkha, I don't think there's a dilemma for feminists at all, because when we talk about, essentially, when we say believe women, what are we saying? We're not saying believe the woman who's saying she's been harassed and then take action against the person who's, or just sort of blacklist that person. What we're saying is put a process in place, get those wheels working. Believe doesn't mean blindly believe and act on that belief, because you don't have the facts. Guni doesn't
Yeah,
have all the facts. Asya doesn't have all the facts. None of us has all the facts, right? So
right.
us believing or not believing doesn't really make a difference. And since the beginning, I think all of us have been very clear about saying about the fact that when we say believe women, we say, hey, let's get that process going, right? And in industry like film, where there is no body to monitor this, and there is no place to go to. I mean, it's just one side against the other, and then there's a bunch of people and cliques that get together. um, I don't see a dilemma here. 2 years ago should have been the time when we had a process in place for people in the film industry with no governing body, none of those things that corporates and other places of employment have. 2 years should have been the time when that should have been put into place. Since that didn't happen, right now, I think the best way to your question, not to me, but general question is how do we keep politics out of it? We stop talking about the timing. We stop talking about who's saying what. We just stop talking about any of that nonsense.
So
We
what should we
figure out
talk about? One minute, 1 minute. It's very important that you've said that the timing doesn't matter. Why doesn't the timing matter? And if the timing, and when they mean timing, I don't think Guneet meant, and I'll ask Guneet to explain it herself, but I don't think she meant that this is a 2014 case that is coming up in 2020. I think what she meant is that at a time when Anurag Kashyap has been extremely critical of the government, this has come up. I'll allow Guneet to respond herself, but I want you to explain to me why you're saying timing doesn't matter, Sandhya.
because that just sullies the process, Barkha. I mean, if this timing matters when he's being outspoken about the government and when he's being critical, you're going to take that into consideration and then see, it might be the fact that Payal Ghosh is a clever little play to get Anurag Kashyap into trouble. I'm perfectly open to that, right? But let that not, if it's a feminist dilemma we're talking about, let's not talk about the fact that there's a timing issue here in terms of it comes at a time when he's being critical of the government. If we're talking about safety of women and safe workplaces, there's no place for that. If we're talking about politics and we're talking about why this is happening and the future of Anurag Kashyap's career, that's a different conversation. When it comes to safety, when it comes to safe work practices, there's no issue of
Okay.
timing either for Payal to come up with or for anyone
Okay,
else.
I do want the other two to respond to this because this is at the hub of the conversation. I'll just bring Guneet briefly back into the conversation because Guneet is the person who made the point about the timing. Guneet, go ahead. You heard what Sandhya said, and Sandhya saying that look, what Me Too is about giving the complaint enough credibility to have it examined threadbare. If the complaint is false, the process should be just enough, should be fair enough, should be robust enough that the complaint will be found to be false.
Absolutely. I think Me Too is a very, very important movement.
Sorry,
Time
we
to
just, yeah. Sorry,
to
just
talk.
repeat that. We lost you briefly in there, but just repeat what you were saying. Yeah.
So I said, I think Me Too is a very important movement, and it is a very powerful movement. Uh, but to tarnish at this point of time when somebody is standing up against and taking a political stand, to tarnish somebody's image by putting a Me Too harassment case is hopefully not politics. It's hopefully, I mean, it should totally be examined. It should totally be, and in the court of law, be taken to account, and there should be implications because stuff like this should not be used um, randomly by anyone.
Yeah.
I think for life, I mean, we have seen how media trials happen. We have seen how judgments are set up. We have seen how trolling happens,
Yeah.
um, how a certain opinion feels, how half the country today feels like industry is a bad place to work in. It's not. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful, amazing, huge industry, and I think Anurag Kashyap solely has given chances to, I think, so many amazing new men and women, and goes out of the way to create safe spaces. So knowing that personally, I do say that. Uh, Having said that, of course, the woman has she's very much in her right to put out a note, um, to put out her experience, and I think the court of law, our judiciary should investigate this and set precedences that somebody is not irresponsible about making these claims, is not being opportunist in making these
Yeah.
claims. The video to me seems extremely flimsy, and it's upsetting to put Richa, Huma. I have
Yeah.
worked with. I produced Gangs of Wasseypur. Um, they worked very hard to get those roles,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that the timing we can have a debate about, but the fact that a woman's complaint about sexual harassment actually slurs and character assassinates three other women, that, Sandhya, I think is extremely difficult to take seriously, Sandhya. I just, sorry, Asya, I know you want to talk about the processes and not the case, so that's why I'm just keeping a little bit of the conversation on the case and then I'll come to you. Sandhya, now see, the kind of comments that we're getting are either full support for Anurag Kashyap, seeing him as the victim, or there are full opposition, because that's the polarized time we live in. But what bothers me is the comment that's on our screen right now. Has Me Too become slander at will? What worries me is that when we see these kind of incidents, Me Too is going to get hijacked by politics, it's going to get hijacked by camp wars, and women are not going to be believed. And that's why I'm worried that we are at an inflection point now with this movement. Please react to that.
We absolutely are, Barkha. I mean, this kind of has Me Too become slander at will. We've been hearing for over 2 years, right? And it doesn't stop. What even the other day when Payal Ghosh had said whatever her video had said, I saw a comment, Abhi kyun bataya? I'm like, for God's sake, 2 years after this conversation in the mainstream, we've still got this question. I think it's at this point we've got to sort of sift the rubbish from the chaff from the wheat and focus on the fact that there are two things here. One, Payal's allegation. Two, the fact that she spoke extremely derogatory of colleagues. Right? None of us in our right minds would have done, if we put out a complaint either publicly or to our employer, would ever bring other colleagues down if they hadn't perpetrated anything on us. So the two things here that we need to absolutely focus on, and I think we need, and that's where the conversation should be instead of the side taking that we're doing, is Payal's complaint relevant and what do we do about it? And I think each of those three women who have been spoken derogatively should follow Richa's footstep and say, hey, I'm going to take legal action against this. I think that's the only way to go through with this.
So here's what I'm wondering. As someone who is a passionate supporter of Me Too, today I am pausing and I am saying, have the limitations of the movement. I'm not saying has the core of the movement been exposed. I'm saying have the limitations of the movement been exposed. Is there no option but eventually the court of law? Whether it is the Priya Ramani MJ Akbar case, where in fact it was Mr. Akbar who took Priya Ramani to court. In this particular case, Anurag Kashyap is taking legal action. Richa Chadda is taking legal action. And Ms. Payal Ghosh is also taking legal action. She has announced, her lawyer has announced that they are going to be filing an FIR. So, Asya, if I can now bring you in on what this does to our understandings, especially I know organizations will want to know, look, how are we going to handle this? Tomorrow, anyone can say anything. How do we make sense of Me Too? What should we be doing? I know a lot of companies, organizations will be alarmed, will be confused right now.
Yeah, absolutely, Barkha. It can't just be legal mechanisms, and it can't obviously be Me Too that is going to bring us closure, that is going to heal us, that is going to help us find proper solutions. I think we have to look for alternative solutions. We have to look for lateral solutions. We have to be using our imaginative capacities to think of how to tackle this. All of us, those who are victims, those who have accused others, those who have got accused, those who feel remorse, those who are not feeling remorse and are saying that, the complainant is lying. All of us have to sit together across a table and arrive at solutions to this problem. I am really not interested in listening to what the victim said right now and what this particular respondent is saying, whether the timing is right. Why have we come to this stage? Why don't we form preventive mechanisms in place? Why don't we look at this structurally? The law, the 2013 POSH Act, asks you to create an internal committee, which is an alternative to the legal mechanism. It's asking you to bring law into your workplace. You don't need a lawyer for this process. It's just a bunch of you. A senior woman is the chairperson. You get one person outside, and this person is not a lawyer. She's not going to, we don't need a person who will get into, procedural issues and say, okay, did this happen 91 days ago or did it happen 94 days ago, right? So the goal is that a bunch of us with a raised consciousness, with an ability to look at things through a social justice lens, with a conscience. So it's not about law, it's about ethics. Why are we so stuck on the law? The ICC and the POSH mechanisms are an alternative bunch of mechanisms. The ICC is not supposed to replicate the court. We are not supposed to be doing things exactly the way the court does. We created it because the law was empathetic to women.
So let me ask you this. I know you will not comment on the specific case, but if you were advising an organization that had to process this complaint, right? And what would you advise them to do? Because if you want to avoid the conversation on he said, she said, that's the conversation you want to avoid. What would you institutionally advise? For example, what should the Producers Guild or the Directors Guild do at this point? Or what should Mr. Kashyap's company, Mr.
But
Kashyap runs a company,
I don't like
what should
going
he do
to,
at this point?
yeah, I don't like entering situations when the, whatever has hit the ceiling, right?
Yeah.
Ideally, these are things we should be discussing when we don't have this sort of an issue at hand. Because now, to be frank, whatever you do, whatever anyone does is going to be wrong. It's only going to lead to more bitterness, more polarization, more slandering of a movement, which I think was really needed. It was a movement that was extremely powerful, and I've met some of the, I think some of the women who spoke up during this are extremely articulate and extremely, what should I say, sensible, intelligent, capable, professional women. Right. So I'm not liking that this movement is being slandered in this manner. And at the same time, I understand that there are other factors at play as well. So I would say that every organization should really look at forming their committees, forming emotionally intelligent policies, thinking about this not as a checklist item, right? But thinking about it, I mean, and a culture that has enabled sexual harassment and the and objectification of women for centuries is not going to go away by tweeting about it or by writing about these sociological factors on social media. It requires sustained long-term interventions.
Right.
You cannot solve this problem without thinking about it very strategically and designing very, very specific solutions for this industry and for each organization and each workspace within this industry, because this industry is very broad.
I just
Guneet, I know you wanted to come in, but I just want to give you all a sense of the kind of comments that we're getting. And they reflect the polarization that we actually inhabit. And this is what's worrying me, that gender is now going to be sacrificed at the altar of politics. We are going to be unable to find a voice for ourselves, because we are going to be asked to first identify ourselves as right-wing or left-wing, whereas that should not matter. I think some of us spoke up, for example, when the Tarun Tejpal case took place, and it didn't really matter to us, which side of the political divide he was on. But Guneet, I'm going to read out some of the comments. A lot of people think that you're making the absolute right point. For example, Sonia Gulati is saying this is a complete misuse of Me Too. Payal Ghosh seems to have woken up exactly at the time when Anurag has exposed Kangana. And another person, Mopit Mehta, says Guneet makes a good point. Stuff like this should be taken up at courts, not used in the middle of a political fight. But here's the worry. What if every woman is now told, if she does say, I have been sexually harassed, go to the court? And that's what I think is going to happen after this, that either a complaint will have to go before a POSH committee, which is the sexual harassment committee, or it will have to go to court. Whereas the way the Me Too movement played out, in India at least, and even in the rest of the world, a lot of stuff was just placed in the public domain, and then the chips fell where they did. So Guneet, come back on this, because you did refer to difference. Just one question. You did refer to differences you've had with Anurag Kashyap. Also, Mr. Kashyap at one point was accused, along with a team, of not handling certain sexual harassment cases fast enough, appropriately enough. So there is that history, which of course is not at all the same as being guilty of harassment. Many companies are insensitive to complaints about harassment, which is a different debate. But I just wanted to put that on the table as well. Go ahead, Guneet.
I passionately feel about the Me Too movement, and I really strongly feel that it is being hijacked right now, and that is what I stand against, and that is what I don't want it to happen. I don't want this movement to be stooped to a absolute low where women or any organization is planting people or even putting up conversations, because what's going to happen is that it leads to more Twitter debates, it leads to more judgments, it leads to media trials, it leads to so much opinion and so much polarizing, which does not help any which ways, which colors the further process or having sanity of the process. This is sacred. This is something which is very, very important. This is the pushback. This is women more on the table. It's almost like going backwards. And I've heard people say after the Me Too movement, let's not hire more women because it's a trouble, and that things like these are a problem.
Yeah.
Things,
Yeah.
we need men who make space for women, who hire women. This industry has outdoor schedules. This industry has its environment, but
Yeah.
it also works efficiently. It also works amazingly. It also is deeply empowering. And I actually, do want to say that Anurag took a stand and shut down his previous company, Phantom Films,
Mhm.
and was very out and open in saying that maybe justice at my end is delayed, but at this point of time, I stop all my businesses, which is a huge call, which
Yeah.
is a huge step forward for a progressive feminist person. And when such a huge there are financials at stake, there are shareholders at stake. It is a huge step in interest of this movement, so I can't ignore that.
So here's what I want to ask you, Guneet, and it's for the rest of the panel as well. A lot of people, yourself, Tapsi Pannu, Anurag Kashyap's ex-spouses, have all called him a feminist, right? These are many, many credible women saying this person is a feminist. Our experience of him has been as a sensitive, progressive feminist man. There are people who will counter this by saying that there are many people who had progressive politics, Bill Clinton, Harvey Weinstein, stood for liberal progressive politics. I'm not drawing any literal analogies. We just have to have a transparent conversation where we examine and explore our contradictions. Tarun Tejpal. These were, in the scheme of things, people who stood self-describedly as progressives. So can that be a reason for us to immediately dismiss the charge based on intuition or our own experience of the person? I have to ask you this question. I know it's probably painful for you because Anurag is a close friend, but do answer the question.
As I said, I started this conversation saying that a creative genius mentor uh, can be a sexual predator. His
Yeah.
experience, another woman's experiences with him can be different from mine. And I have grown up in a system of, Anurag's allowed, and we have all encouraged a conversation, a pushback, a debate. So
Mhm.
very empathetic. Very open to hearing a woman's plea, to hearing and taking steps that are needed for this. Extremely open, accessible, and in the woman's team at any day, at anyone, if wants to address something of somebody who I call a mentor, or somebody I put myself out there. At least when I think about Richa Huma and I think about Gangs of Wasseypur, that was on my time, and that is why
Yeah.
I deeply push back, and that is why I deeply feel like this is nonsense.
Yeah.
uh, it was on my
Yeah.
watch. I know, and I can stand for that. I was not a
I-
part of Phantom Films. I was not a part of Anurag's further life, but I know that he is an extremely empathetic, aware, open person who encourages free conversation, who has always encouraged that, who's always been outspoken, and he's put his foot forward. And he knows that when he puts his foot forward or he takes a political stand, there are consequences. He's very well aware of that.
yeah.
But the misusing of the movement is completely not done. It's the new law, and it's just further coloring somebody's image and reputation, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I actually would agree that the most problematic part, Sandhya, of the Payal Ghosh complaint is to drag three other women in, not just by implication, but directly, right? So it's not even, even if, for example, you knew the three other women had been harassed, you cannot go public with that without their consent. Choice is at the heart of this conversation. So, for example, let's talk about your case. I know in your case there were other women involved, but it's not like you would have listed their names without their consent. Secondly, in this particular case, as we can see from Richa Chadda's statement, she doesn't believe this to be true. She, in fact, thinks that she thinks that Payal Ghosh in this case is the perpetrator against her, not Anurag Kashyap. So even if timing is not relevant to you, isn't the point that Guneet making that these are women that I worked with, I was there. There are other women being dragged into this. How is that feminist? Doesn't that speak to you, Sandhya?
So, like you said, Barkha, it's absolutely unethical to name other survivors. If you think other women are survivors, it's absolutely unethical to name them when you're making your own complaint. But there's nothing else to be said for that. I mean, this is somebody who is obviously, uh, if if I were to take the framework that she's speaking the truth, then this is a person who is not looking at consequences, who's not looking at a resolution, who's not looking at effects of what's going on. She just wants to say her piece, right? If we take
Yeah.
the framework that she is speaking the truth, which
Yeah.
is why I mean, look at what she's attracted right now, right? She's attracted legal action. Now, I don't know if she has the backing of whatever people to be assured that she can see herself through it, but it's something that it puzzles me. Why would you do that unless you're really sure that these three women will back you up, or this is not dragging them down in any other way? You wouldn't take names, you wouldn't do this. My issue with this whole situation is the fact that it's after 2 years of 3 years of everyone yelling and shouting about in almost every industry or every arm of the media that this happens, someone still chose to do this on Twitter. Someone still chose to do this on social media instead of going down the process that we've been screaming for, right? And for me, that's where everything gets muddled. If she'd gone down a regular process, no matter who she named wouldn't have been out of the public, right? No matter who she had spoken about wouldn't
Yeah.
be there yelling and shouting at each other. And that's at the heart of this, right? How do you choose to, after 3 years of women speaking about their experience, but also getting massive pushback, right? Saying, stop doing this
But
online,
that's
go
the
to your,
Yeah, but is that
right?
not reasonable? I have to say this. Is that not reasonable pushback? Because look at the comment right now on our screen. Saurabh Suri writing and saying, Guneet is right. Hiring a woman scares me in the current scenario. And Guneet was making the point that if this keeps happening, this is going to come out on women. Right now, Anurag Kashyap may be the immediate heart of the story, but eventually women are going to pay the price for how this is all playing out. Sandhya?
This debate was happening 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when all of this started, also, Barkha. But I don't see a significant drop in where women were hired. And also, this is a call not to not hire women; it's to strengthen practices in your workplace. So the minute someone says, I'm afraid to hire women, I'm thinking, what's wrong with your thought process, or what's wrong with your organization, that you're not thinking about fixing the loser aspects of your organization
Yeah.
as opposed to hiring women. I mean,
I, th-
that's
I,
50% of your
I, th- I
economy,
think
right?
I think Guneet is trying to interject, and then I'll go to Asiya. Yeah, Guneet, go ahead. Yeah.
I think the problem is both ways. Even parents don't feel safe of sending women to my industry, and I love the film industry. I come from a extremely humble middle class family and have made a career and made some amazing friends, and worked in the industry for more than 15 years now. I'm a producer. Um, when I was working at AKFPL, we made around 20 films. Per film, there were around 2 to 300 people working. So it's that kind of responsibility that you take and that kind of processes that you set up. Uh, and in and in times of conflict, those kind of difficult conversations you have, you know and we
Yeah.
are all evolving, we are all figuring it out, making it a more safe space. But I can tell you that parents are not comfortable sending their girls to this industry. There are a lot of still, if you see, less than 5% films are directed by women. There is a clear work gap, there is a clear
Yeah.
pay gap. We have bigger battles to fight than to bring politics between, and
100%.
misuse a whole movement. Just
Yeah.
Yeah, so let me bring in Asya. Asya, you said that you don't like coming in after the proverbial, I'll say it, shit has hit the fan. But the point is that this is going to underline the limitations of the Me Too campaign. And I think all of us are going to have to step back and try and make sense of this. All the 4 women on this program have been outspoken advocates of the Me Too campaign, right? I have quarreled with friends. I have quarreled with friends about insensitive judicial process that doesn't give space to women. I have told the story of Bhavri Devi, a Dalit woman in Rajasthan who gave us the Vishakha guidelines, who was gang raped, including by the father of a one-year-old child who was going to be married, whose marriage she was trying to prevent, right? We also have to recognize that all of us relatively come from privilege, and there is a whole different fight going on outside of our class. But what worries me is what this does to women in the workspace, right? Sandhya says this was said earlier. Women didn't stop getting hired. I'm not so sure. Our female labor force participation is on the decline. So, Asiya, let me bring you in now.
Yeah. Yeah, so let me, Barkha, talk about some of the, I'm not an academic, so I talk about what I see and what I hear. I'm a very in the field kind of person. So in the film industry specifically, the little that I've worked, and work pretty much started just after Me Too, and even now it's it's very very superficial in most places. We're just doing the checklist items of trying to form some sort of a committee, cut paste policy from somewhere. We are not really digging deep. We are not really trying to understand what we need to do. So let me just talk about my maybe 2-year experience with a few organizations in the film industry. So what I see there actually is a huge amount of passion for work. I see talent. However, with these positives comes, a certain disorganization and a very pronounced and a very visible lack of respect for standards and protocols. Right. So from when I migrated from the suited and booted corporate world, it took me a while to adjust to the very bohemian film industry. And I really like it. And I can't think of a better word, but I think you'll get what I mean. I find people here in a way very pure-hearted. I've actually seen pure-hearted passion for the work they do. But I think this whole lack of respect for standards, ground rules, structure, this manifests itself in very ugly ways. Right? There is complete lack of boundary between professional and social spaces. Now, is a wrap-up party
but isn't that true? Isn't that true for all our professions? I mean, maybe I'm a kind of affiliated profession being in the media, but work does spill over into our personal lives. Where does that not happen?
Absolutely. I think you made a very good point. Let's not only single out the film industry. That's what I was also kind of trying to say in a very roundabout way, I guess. You're right. So it's a lot of spaces, media and many other creative spaces, even corporate spaces. We are still struggling. I mean, we're a little ahead in some things, but even there are struggles. There's a lot of hostility towards women. There is a lot of, everyday sexism and sort of stereotyping of women. Women can't write code, and women are here just to look good. And, so there is a whole lot of hostile work environment in corporates as well. But I think this lack of boundaries between professional and social spaces, this, I don't want to use a negative word, but this enthusiasm, let me say, for work makes you very vulnerable. This, it's kind of a desperation. This celebrity worship culture, mentor hai mera. I mean, as though a mentor is kind of God or is above the law. Or a film can't be a hit unless, so-and-so directs it or unless so-and-so acts in it. So these things give people who have attained positions, and often these positions are based on power and privilege amassed over generations. Sometimes that may not be the case, but very often it's, India is a feudal country. So these people who have attained power assert a lot of influence over newcomers. And this combined with the fact that there is a large pool of struggling professionals, semi-professionals, there's uncertainty, there's insecurity. This is a very toxic situation. And how can the industry not think about this situation?
Okay, so it's a fair question, and I want to bring Guneet in. But before Guneet responds, I do want to tell our audience that there is something to be said, and I'm not saying that's how guilt or innocence of anybody should be determined, by the number of women who have underlined feeling safe working with Anurag Kashyap, whereas the exact opposite, for example, happened with an MJ Akbar. Now, should that not count for something? I want Sandhya to think over that, because of course the argument can be that even if it happens just to one woman and every other woman's experience has been different, that woman has a right to her space, of course. But in this case, from former spouses to, even Sayami has issued a statement today saying, I had this notion of Anurag Kashyap being unsafe, and then I got to know him and I realized I was wrong. So Guneet, I want you to respond to all of this, but I'll read out a comment that's on our screen right now. It's funny, but it might also be true. This entire issue is a distraction from what Kangana Ranaut said about Bollywood, which is a distraction from Ria's arrest, which was a distraction from Sushant Singh's case, which was, of course, a distraction from everything that Anurag Kashyap has been talking about. In other words, let's do everything but talk about the economy, but talk about COVID. Let's just ensure that every day we are discussing almost everything else but that. And I think this is an important question.
I just want to come in here and say, tell me one other person in our huge industry who has been standing up for so many people for so many years. Tell me one other person who has opened doors for so many newcomers and produced, directed these many movies, has been on it. So he's not somebody who's outspoken and taken a stand today. He's been doing that for a while, and he has been on that target. So I just feel like this is targeted towards Anurag, who has constantly been taking a very tough stand, who's constantly been calling out, who has constantly been calling out bullshit, bullshit. And this is just, it breaks my heart that it is a hijack of a really important women empowerment movement that I feel passionate about, that I feel is really needed. So I, and
But do
again,
you want to respond to Asia's point about this being this great industry but being haphazard? How it sometimes gets caught in its own bohemian self-image. How the sort of after party is where it's at. How young people who do not fit in sometimes think that the only way to fit in is actually to be sexualized, right? I think that's what she's really referring to. You've made your point about Anurag Kashyap, but step back and put a larger lens on the industry.
I absolutely strongly feel like every production house and every producer, it's a responsibility to set up guidelines, to have these guidelines put on the walls when you enter the office. You have to say that this is a space where we respect, and the actions are taken, and you have to actions are taken severely. You also have to clearly say that if there is a misbehave, even at a team
Oops.
within,
Yeah.
even at a younger junior level within the teams,
Yeah.
they should know that it is safe to call up somebody. It's safe to speak up. I absolutely believe these processes need to be set up. These processes are there in my company. They are strictly there in Secure. Uh, and there are cases that we have also dealt with. There are processes that we have set, and we are learning. I can talk about myself. I mean,
Yeah.
come from, again, a humble family, and I'm a producer in the industry, to the large opinion of our country. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I go to all the parties, I enjoy, I have friends, um, and we know our distance, we know our space. You don't
Yeah.
have to be anyone to break into this. You don't have to project, you don't have to have night outs, you don't have to, I mean, you just have to be good at your work, and you just have to
Yeah.
show up. It is
And
a passion,
actually,
and
yeah,
it is.
but sorry, I'm interjecting. But this could be a great dialogue to have with within the industry of how you need to come across. I think we could talk about things like how to be more assertive in situations where you want to say no. Maybe these are the sort of specific interventions that we will have to design for people, right? To build character, to build conscience and consciousness about your interpersonal ethics. So I think
I
the
think
remedy
teaching,
and the solution lies there.
Okay,
I
I'll
think
just let
teaching
Guneet complete her point and then I'll go to Sandhya. Yeah, Guneet, go ahead. Yeah.
I think teaching empathy in school, teaching equality, and having boys learn about respect, equality, because we've seen a generation of mothers, and a generation of parents wanting a boy, then serving a boy. We're all products of patriarchy. I mean, I was not born feminist. I have
Yeah.
learned what
Yeah.
what my space is. I have not always been treated as an equal, and I have pushed back where I could. I have learned on how to. I have documented. I've put emails. I have, you learn to be a better professional. But
Yeah.
I can tell you for my industry that you just have to be good at your work, and you will rise. You will get all the work, no matter. You don't have to show up at any parties. You don't have to do anything. And I am a walking talking example. I can
Example
check
of that.
life. I
Okay.
mean, I sleep at
Okay.
10.
And sleep at 10. Okay. I don't know anyone who sleeps at 10. I most know people who can't sleep. So I'm jealous of you. But on a more serious note, Sandhya, there is a comment from Shreya on our screen who says, let us not do a trial by media again. Let agencies do their job. Let's refocus our conversation on the economy rather than this. I hope both Payal and Anurag get justice. So I think this is an important sort of comment that both people have an entitlement for the correct thing to happen. But my conversation returns to me too. Have we returned to a point where one of the lessons perhaps we're learning is that you can't just take to Twitter, as originally this movement started, and say I was sexually harassed. You can't just take to Instagram and say I was sexually harassed, but I won't tell you the name of my perpetrator, or I will tell you the name of my perpetrator, but you just have to believe me, and my saying it is enough. Now, this is what Me Too was founded on. All of us actually backed the spirit of it out of sheer frustration with the hostility of the legal process. But are we getting a reality check here that this movement has its limitations? It breaks my heart to have to confront that possibility, but I think we might be confronting that possibility.
So yeah, we've been confronting this possibility for a bit, right? I
Yeah,
myself have sort of dealt with two cases 2 years ago where I had to go up on my Twitter and apologize for putting those cases out because they turned out to be false, right?
yeah.
And it was shocking for me when one of the
Oops, that's your phone.
sorry,
Go ahead.
everyone.
Go. Yeah. That's okay. That's okay. Just
Okay,
carry on speaking, and we'll
okay.
fix it. Yeah,
So it was sort of it and to hear that one of the women did it because I don't know, she just wanted to get somebody's attention, and this was 2 years ago, right? And I still haven't gotten over that moment when uh, the man she called out turned around and said thank you for clearing my name. I mean, that is just, it weighs massively on me even today. So the misuse didn't start out today or yesterday or whatever. So if it's going to be misused, it's going to be misused. The point is, those of us who are vocal about it, those of us who've put our weight behind it, need to be focused on where this is going to go, which is ultimately that women get the justice that we need. Do we need to think about how the movement is going forward? Absolutely. Do we need to think about how we're going to keep talking about this issue? Yes. Do we need to stop using social media to talk about our stories and do it anonymously? Yes. I got into a
yeah,
lot of trouble a few months ago when I said that you can't go on an anonymous handle, say this man did this to me, but I will not tell you my name and I will not tell you anything about
yeah,
me, but I
yeah,
want justice. And
yeah.
everyone said, you have the privilege of being non-anonymous. You have the
So
privilege of putting your face
you've
and
said
name to it.
something, Sandhya, you've said something really important, and I want to take it to the other two guests, and I'm going to give you this chance to actually flip your phone around because you're currently
Yeah.
upside down to us,
Sorry.
like our world feels right now. So we understand the world
I'll do
feels
that right
upside down
away.
right now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So we're just going to give you a chance to do that, and I'm just going to go
Yeah.
back. There you are. Just if you can turn it horizontal, that would be great, and I'll get Guneet in the meantime. Sandhya, just flip your phone around one more time, and then we can actually see you the way we're meant to. Guneet, Sandhya has made this really important point that social media, which was the main mechanism for the Me Too movement, that even she ended up actually outing the names of people who it turned out to be were not really perpetrators at all. So will the movement at least have to change that much, that we can't just kind of go on these social media platforms and just say so and so is guilty. We can't declare guilt and innocence on social media platforms. It has to be an institutional process. Me Too can no longer escape an institutional process. I think that's what we're hearing and learning from this moment.
I absolutely agree. I think it should be process driven. It should be it should be reported. Put your emotions out there on an email. You write them down. It becomes even more important, clearer. You send them out to. You should be able to know to the person and how to be able to deal with this. The posh committee within the company, or it cannot be media trials, it cannot be social justice of this, of the entire country coming on Twitter trolling people, and declaring people rapists, putting such names on and otherwise an extremely amazing righteous person.
I want to ask you, I've taken a comment on the screen because a lot of people will think that I won't take it otherwise, who say that there was a hypocrisy of liberals when it comes to how they responded to Nana Patekar compared to how they responded to Anurag Kashyap. The basic underlying criticism is that when someone we like, someone we love, when someone is on our side of the world is accused, we believe in his innocence. But when someone is on the other side, we don't. And that when Tanushri Datta actually lashed out at Nana Patekar, everybody, and it was at the height of the Me Too movement, everybody believed her. So I think please do respond, because we will have to confront this in the coming days, whether we responded differently in the heady peak of the Me Too movement from how we are responding now. Guneet.
Actually, something that I can share is that during the Me Too movement, when there was the case of the survivor with Phantom Films, I stood very strong with the survivor, and and it is not something to be put on social media. It's something that I we do as women.
Yeah.
We ask important
Yeah.
questions. We take we talk through difficult conversations, and we see how the person is responding, and I was very strongly with the survivor. So this is not going in eyes blind. This is not me coming in eyes blind. I am talking about stuff I have seen. I
Yeah.
have written film sets that Anurag's directed, Anurag's produced. And I am, and again, Gangs of Wasseypur was on my watch. I know what it took Huma and Richa to get those roles, and how hard they
Yeah.
worked, how talented they are. This is not done. This is a hijack of the Me Too movement. This is regressing all of us. There has to be a practice put before the whole country decides that somebody is Me Too
Yeah.
uh,
So, what is
victim.
that practice? Yeah, I think that's the important point. I have to take concluding comments briefly from all of you now. We've actually spoken close to an hour, but we've had so many comments come in on our live stream. There is huge interest in this issue, not just because it involves people from Bollywood, but because Me Too is something that concerns all. It concerns organizations who have to hire, it concerns organizations that have to deal with complaints, and it concerns all of us women. And by the way, as the West shows, also young men. We have had boys come forward talking about, also being having to deal with their own Me Too movement, sometimes by very, very well-known Me Too advocates. We've seen this happen in America. Sandhya, what are the lessons we learn from here onwards? I think briefly concluding comments, we'll start with you. Yeah.
I think one of the things that we've got to take back, and I say this all the time, is that what we know of our friends, what we know of the people that we love and care for, has to be set aside. And like Guneet said earlier, we've got to have those difficult conversations, right? And at any point, we can't let our affections influence the way we listen to somebody who's been harassed, who has a grievance against the
Yeah.
men that we love, and we love a lot of men, right? So
Yeah.
that's one of the lessons. The other lesson is, I think it's just about, it's just we've got to go beyond reaching out to people who are vocal in social media and say, hey, can you put my story out? Or we've got to be more than the people who have a massive following and say, I was harassed on social media. I mean, that's got to stop. I mean, there's no space for it. The point of the Me Too movement was to take sexual harassment at the workplace seriously. If we've gotten halfway there, now it's time to start doing it in a way that can be documented, that can be analyzed, that can actually leave emotions out of it, and look at it from a very practical, solution-oriented way, which is not about taking sides. These are the two biggest lessons for me
Yeah.
today. Yeah.
And I think you made the good point about social media is no longer, it was a beginning point to showcase this
Yeah.
movement and to showcase its scale.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's not the platform where these complaints can be sorted.
You can't
Asya?
do it anymore. No.
Yeah.
Asya? Yeah, you
I
can't do it
think,
anymore. Yeah.
this culture of hunting down each other, of making things adversarial, of getting, really, of making this whole thing sound more chaotic than it actually is, has to
Yeah.
stop. We have to preempt discrimination. We have to preempt harassment. We have to make attempts to eradicate damaging mindsets and behaviors. The writing on the wall is really clear. We also know what needs to be done. It's just that we are not doing it. We are just waiting and we are letting things become what they've become. And even now, I say, the optimist in me says, the incorrigible optimist in me says, even now it's not too late. Let's put our act together. Even now, we can do it.
Guneet, I'll give you the last word. You have, of course, defended Anurag Kashyap passionately. Do you believe that the court should have the last word on this? How does this actually get resolved?
I mean, unfortunately, with social media lynching, like somebody just said,
Yeah.
with polarizing of opinions, with distraction from the real issues, we have uh, it's an unfortunate use of a movement, and that is what we are passionately against. It is taking us years of suppression back. I mean, women have been suppressed, and it is
Yeah.
taking us back. And social media was supposed to help it. Social media was supposed to bring us together. It's gone in another direction, which is so scary. It's destroying people. It is destroying families. It is
Yeah.
coloring our opinions, and it is toxic, for the lack of
Yeah.
better word.
Yeah.
At this point of time, yes, it will need to be legal. At this point of time, it will need to not be an offline chat or a posh committee. At this point of time, it will need to be legal, and the message should be clearly put out there for anybody trying to misuse this movement, for
Yeah.
anybody, and implications for this. And if any of this is true, the implication to men should totally happen. So
Yeah.
I just feel helpless, and I feel sad. I feel we are going back. I feel
Yeah.
we are losing the momentum that we had. I want to believe every woman. I still believe women. There needs to be more women. There needs to be more jobs, and it needs to be a safe space. And this needs to be given. This needs to be a world we bring our children in. But needs to be the world we inhabit, and that's the world we want to see. And
Yeah.
any kind of discrimination on gender or gaslighting or bullying needs to stop and needs to be called out. But there has
Yeah.
to be a process for it. And I think the world, and especially our country, can do with more empathy and less judgment.
Yeah, and I think what all of us have agreed on is the need for process, the need for institutions. That perhaps the first fire was lit by the Me Too movement on social media, but social media can no longer be that space where guilt and innocent, or even your first complaint, is decided. You want to talk to the media, by all means do, but there have to be institutions and fair institutions, institutions that we can trust. That's the other thing. We will continue to have these conversations because not everybody has faith in institutions. So, how do you make institutions trustworthy? But I thank you because we've had this conversation with some slight disagreements, which are important to address, but without once losing our civility. It is still possible, even in today's polarized age. Guneet, Monga, Sandhya, Menon, and Asiya Shervani, thank you. Thank you to our audience. Many
I
of you have written in the questions. Yes, Guneet, quickly. Yeah,
want to say
you want to?
one thing, that there
Yes,
should not be any more media trials. We
yes,
need we need we need ethical practices even in the media, in the
yes.
free
Oh,
pillar,
yes.
in the free spoken, the one of the most important pillars of our
Oh,
democracy.
yes.
We need ethical practice, and the noise is ridiculous. And like we know, fake news travels 6 times more. WhatsApp has become toxic.
Yeah,
And this industry is an amazing place, but structures, it can do better with structures, and so can the media industry. And thank you, Barkha.
absolutely. Thank you, Guneet. And I completely take the point on best practices that are needed for my profession that unfortunately have been missing now for far too long. Thank you again to our panel. Thank you to our audience. So many of you wrote in. I did try and take as many comments as I could, but there were many more than I could handle. This will be available on Mojo Story and all our other platforms on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. So all of you and your friends and family will have a lot of opportunities to see it again if you missed it live telecast. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Goodbye and see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barkha.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.